and justice for.
Missoula County acknowledges that this event takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. We have two public announcements. Cheryl gets number one.
Hello, everyone. If you're joining us for this meeting virtually today, instructions for turning on closed captioning are on your screen. If you're joining us in person, we will have closed captioning on all the screens here in the Sophie Moise room, and we also have assisted listening devices available. Please come to me if you would like an assisted listening device, and we will get one for you. We ask that all speakers today please remember to speak slowly and clearly during the meeting. This helps with the accuracy of the closed captioning. There will be multiple chances during the meeting for public comment virtually. During those times, if you'd like to speak, we ask that you use the raise hand feature. If you are on Microsoft Teams, this is the small hand button. If you're calling in on the phone, you need to hit *5 to raise your hand. Then once called on, you'll need to hit *6 to unmute. If you have any questions or concerns, please find me during the meeting and let me know. Thank you.
Thanks. You guys want to do the next one?
Good afternoon, everyone. We have a proclamation of Missoula County. Whereas this proclamation recognizes suicide as a community-wide problem and suicide prevention as requiring a community effort. And whereas Montana's suicide rate is the second highest in the nation and has ranked among the top 5 states with the highest rates of suicide for the past 4 decades. And whereas since 2018, Missoula County has experienced 143 suicides, and whereas suicide by firearm accounts for 54% of all suicides in the United States and 63% of all suicides in Montana, and guns stored in the home are used for suicide 40 times more than for self-defense. And whereas it is important to support our recently launched National Suicide Prevention Lifeline call center here in Missoula, along with our new mobile response units who can effectively and empathetically intervene in crisis situations. And whereas our community will support suicide prevention efforts to the maximum extent possible with initiatives like Project Tomorrow Montana, which works to reduce Missoula County suicide deaths and attempts through educational programs and evidence-based policy. Now, therefore, in coordination with National Suicide Prevention Week, we, the Missoula Board of County Commissioners in Montana, do hereby recognize the week of September 7th through the 14th, 2023 as Suicide Prevention Week, signed by the Missoula Board of County Commissioners.
Thanks, Dave. Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
Or maybe on the proclamation that was just read.
Or maybe on the proclamation? It looks like we do. Is the green light on?
The giant green button that I missed. Thank you all for your service and for proclaiming Suicide Prevention Week and recognizing its importance as we collectively address the public health crisis that suicide represents in our county. During the week of September 7 to 14, Project Tomorrow Montana, which as you know is a collaboration between United Way of Missoula County and our City County Health Department, is sponsoring more than a dozen events with our many partners countywide. These include training in how to recognize the signs of suicide in our family members, friends, and colleagues, and how to reach out a hand of help and hope. Project Tomorrow will also be distributing materials and resources and engaging in conversations at the Paddleheads game on September 7, lighting Main Hall on the UM campus on September 13 in the colors of suicide prevention, which are purple and teal. And prior to that, joining with UM students during the day, tabling with materials, resources, and engaging in conversations with our Project Tomorrow team. We can't fix things we can't talk about, so it's important to talk about suicide. A full list of Suicide Prevention Week events can be found on the Project Tomorrow website, projecttomorrowmt.org. through our ongoing efforts, we are making progress. While even one suicide is too many, total suicides in Missoula County are significantly below the rest of the state. We have trained thousands of Missoulians in suicide prevention, more than 550 last year alone, and distributed thousands of gun locks, nearly 600 last year alone. We know that's a best practice in preventing suicide. We were instrumental in getting a 988 suicide prevention hotline call center in Missoula, which has the highest answer rate in the nation, almost 97%. This is so important because help seeking is something that we measure in suicide prevention. Again, for more information about Suicide Prevention Week and how you can prevent suicide, please visit projecttomorrowmt.org. And as always, thank you for your service.
Thank you. More reason to be proud of Missoula. Okay, our current claims list. Claims received as of August 1st, 2023 to August 15th, 2023 by the Commissioner's Office. Total $5,890,796.44. We have 3 hearings today, with the final one being our budget hearing. So for you folks who are here for budget, you got to wait it out, but the other ones will be pretty quick. First up is the Davie Minor subdivision, and Bailey will present.
Sorry, just moving things around. A lot of people up on the podium today. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Bailey Minnick. I'm planner with the Missoula County Planning Office, and I am presenting the Davie Minor subdivision. Okay, the subject property is located at 3125 Lorraine Drive. I have it highlighted, outlined here in red. Oh, let me put my little laser pointer on so you guys can see my screen a little bit better. So it's down here. So this intersection up here is Reserve and Brooks, just for everybody's reference up here in the north, if you can see that. And so we're down here off of Miller Creek Road and way down here kind of at the bottom of the screen. The proposal is a request for 2 residential lots. The existing parcel totals approximately 13.68 acres. This is actually a re-subdivision of a lot from the Mortgage Heights subdivision that was approved back in 1989. As I said, it's located off of Lorraine Drive near Stonehaven Avenue, and there are no variances requested with the project. This is kind of a big picture of the entire property. I have a zoomed in portion in a minute to kind of show it, but I wanted to get the entire proposed preliminary plat for everyone to see. So we review subdivision requests in accordance with a number of criteria. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to hit the highlights for the project. But basically it's zoning, growth policy, access, sanitation, pedestrian facilities, parks, recreation, fire department, and natural environment. And while I'm going through the highlights of these, I have, I had a slide, but I'll get there in a second, I guess. So zoning, the first thing, so the existing growth policy designation is for residential, which recommends a density range between 3 dwelling units per acre and 11 dwelling units per acre, requiring connections to public water and sewer. And the existing zoning is RRS1, which is the Rural Residential Small Agriculture 1 acre. That has a maximum residential density of 1 dwelling unit per 1 acre with a minimum lot size of 1 acre for a residential building type. One thing about the zoning regulations is this property is subject to the hillside and ridgeline development standards. The subdivision proposes, I think actually, yeah, there's my slide. The subdivision proposes the driveway, which is outlined here, if you can see that, to cross through this area that's in yellow slopes between 10 to 24.99%. And the new building site here in this kind of green area is proposed on slopes between 10 and 19.99%. Our zoning regulations, which became effective July 1st of 2022, states that a minor waiver is required for any roads or driveways within those slopes and the building construction. So the applicant was approved for a minor waiver to these sections and therefore is compliant with our zoning regulations. I'm going to leave the PowerPoint or the plot up. So while I'm talking, you guys can see that as well. So the subdivisions are required to reasonably mitigate potentially significant adverse impacts to agriculture and agricultural water facilities. There have been no food production currently on the site, and the property has not historically been utilized for agricultural production. There are also no known existing agricultural water rights that would need to be transferred or abandoned, but there are current agriculture operations are not in proximity, but the property is adjacent to some areas that are zoned for agricultural use to the south. And so we are recommending a condition of approval to add notification to future lot owners about living adjacent to agricultural operations within the covenants, since that could happen on adjacent lots. Direct access is proposed off of Lorraine Drive, which is an existing county maintained road, which has a paved surface width of 24 feet. Both lots will access from Lorraine Drive from an existing approach with the driveway splitting at the front property line. So we are recommending a condition of approval that required an updated approach permit and that approach to be constructed to a paved surface width of 20 feet with the 2-foot shoulders, which would be standard for a road of that size. There are no existing pedestrian paths located along Lorraine Drive. Since they're not including any on-site roads, since the shared approach would split at that front property line, we are recommending a condition that a waiver of the right to protest be placed on the face of the final plat for any future construction of sidewalks that might, or bike lanes that might come in along Lorraine Drive in the future. The proposed lots will be required to undergo sanitation and subdivision review. They include individual septic systems for each lot. Sewer is not out this far. However, Missoula Water is out in this area. So they do have and have received approval from the City of Missoula Utility Service Review Committee, USRC, for that connection. But we did get a comment from the Missoula Public Works and Mobility Department recommending some language for an SID or RSID to go on the face of the final plat for potential future connections to municipal sewer when or if it does get out in this area. Subdivision or minor subdivisions are exempt from the parkland dedication requirements, so that's not applicable to the subdivision. The property is located within the Missoula Rural Fire District. There was a fire hazard assessment completed for the subdivision, which came back with a score of 55, which indicates a moderate risk for fire hazard in this area. So a wildfire hazard defensible space management agreement, as well as a fire suppression plan, was included with the subdivision. And those would be recorded with the covenants as well. The applicant proposes to utilize an existing hydrant that's located on the north side of Lorraine Drive. I believe it's right here. You can see it on the picture. There is a requirement under the International Fire Code that structures over 3,600 square feet would be required to install fire sprinklers within a residence, but this is not a condition of the Missoula County subdivision regulations, even though the applicant is recommending that within their application materials. It's not something that we can condition, but that would get looked at the time of building permit approval. So there is some language in the proposed covenants addressing that for future property owners to be aware. The subdivision does contain some areas of riparian resource. So our definition of riparian in the subdivision regulations doesn't necessarily mean it has to have water in it. That's most of the common things. It can be woody draws or other areas can be considered riparian resource. And that is, you can kind of see it right here. It's back here on this kind of spot right there. So a riparian resource management plan was included with the subdivision, and as a recommended condition of approval, that will be included with the covenants and not be able to be amended without consent of the governing body. This area will also be designated as a no-build zone and shown like that on the face of the plat. The subject property is located within an existing subdivision, as I mentioned, and is surrounded by residential development, so no further impacts to wildlife beyond the current level is anticipated. The property, as I mentioned with the minor waiver, does contain some areas of steep slopes. A geotechnical report was submitted with the subdivision that indicates there's no evidence of slope instability. And we do have a condition of approval regarding the steep slopes be labeled as no build zones. And those you can see in these areas that are in red and kind of hashed. These are all the no build zones. And there's a section up here as well. So we did have 2 agency comments that came in. One was from Five Valley Audubon, and actually they had recommended the preservation of the grassland habitat for bird species, and they actually recommended some steep slopes be designated as no build zone. I'll go back one slide. This area right here was during their comment, and so the developer did go in and change that based on the Five Valley Audubon comment. So this area was also included as a no build zone. And then the comment from the City of Missoula Public Works about the RSID language. Public comment, we did mail adjacent property owners notification on August 4th. We posted the project on the Missoula County Voice page on July 26th. We've had no comments on the project at this time. And so staff is recommending approval of the application, and I have a draft motion prepared, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant is online as well, if you have any questions for them too.
Thanks a lot, Bailey. Would the applicant or their representative like to speak to this?
This is Joshua with Eli and Associates, representing the client, John Davey. And I just want to thank Bailey for her work on this, and we don't have any further comment, but we can answer questions if you'd like.
Thank you. You guys have any questions?
No, straightforward,
Yes.
and that you could work through the issues with the minor, the correct term. Minor waiver.
Minor waiver. I like that. Waiver light.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, any public comment on this? Here we are.
Sir, I think you're gonna have to hit your
There we go. My apology. My name is Dr. Char Gatlin. Thank you for having me. Before we begin, you switched kind of fast off the suicide proclamation. Is the past national commander, or excuse me, national adjutant of the military with the Purple Heart and the current state commander. Good job. It's about time we had that. I applaud Susan Patrick and everyone else that had something to do with it. It just needed to happen. Good. So I live across the street at 3100 Lorraine, and I have a couple questions actually for this gentleman here, if you don't mind. Thank you. To say that's a steep slope is an understatement. That's for sure. I walked it the other day just to see it, and I mean, it's a drop. So my concerns are actually with the construction. I don't necessarily have a problem with the plan. Very comprehensive, by the way. You checked all the blocks. Good job. We have a lot of families in that subdivision, and we don't have a sidewalk, and that road is tight. So my first question is when will it start the construction, and where are we going to put the equipment? Because if you're going to build that road in there, that road, to the schematic that was up, has to go between the heavy fall and then the drop to come around. Is the equipment going to go?
Bailey,
Put it on the street? Are we going to put it down the street?
up.
Where's the?
Josh was muted.
Can I address that?
Absolutely.
My name's John Davey. Thanks for the opportunity to join the meeting. We don't have any plans in the near future to do any construction on or building on that site.
Okay, near future, we talking a year?
Sorry,
We talking less than a year, over a year?
over a year.
Okay. Two, and there's a lot that could change right there. Being that there's no sidewalks, we have, and this has to go with the construction when it comes. I mean, we have 3 or 4 school buses that come up that road every day in the morning and the evening. And putting that equipment wherever it's going to go is going to create quite a bottleneck, because without the sidewalks, we have a lot of moms and families that are walking their children, and you can't really see around it. I mean, these are not really, well, I mean, there are concerns that I have, but maybe things that I could put into context that you could think about, you know, as we get closer to the development site. The other thing is the noise. So I worked on the construction crew years ago when I was young, so I get it. We have a lot of folks up there. I mean, are we talking construction 8 to 5? Are we going to be moving dirt at 06? I mean, obviously you're a year out. There's a lot to plan, but something to, and I guess this isn't really a question, it's more of an observation at this point if you're not doing it within a year. Some sort of noise mitigation or sticking to a plan. We have a lot of younger middle-aged folks. The families are getting up, going off to school. You know, they're working odd times, this, that, and the other. I'm kind of surprised none of them are here, but maybe they didn't know, but you did mail it out. So as I said, these are just concerns that I have. I just wanted to bring them to your attention. You know, as we get closer, maybe we'll, address them down the road. But these are things that, could frustrate the community, no more, no less. So I will yield. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Can I just respond to that just briefly?
Sure.
Thank you, sir, for your concerns, and I will make a commitment that we would do everything possible to mitigate the noise and the disruption and any impact on neighbors if or when we embark on building a house at that site, which, like I mentioned, we have no immediate plans to do. We could conceivably have any construction vehicles or equipment on the driveway that goes to the existing house. And as you mentioned, that's a pretty steep hill. So I think that we would be very sensitive about the noise and not do any construction outside of normal business hours. But I appreciate your concerns and thanks for expressing them.
Thank you for your time and your candor.
I don't have any questions. I move to approve the Davie minor subdivision based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Second.
Any other public comment? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Bailey. Emily and Flana.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is an item to adopt a resolution declaring infrastructure deficient area exists within Missoula County in the area known as the Y2, and that investment in infrastructure in that area is necessary in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Missoula County. So on June 11th, Missoula County entered into a contract with Pioneer Technical Services to assist the county in creation of a targeted economic development district, a TED district at the Y. This TED would be a new TED surrounding and separate from the existing Y TED created in 2020. To differentiate it from the existing Y TED, the area is being considered in the statement of infrastructure deficiency is being referred to as Y2. So the TED designation enables local government to address infrastructure deficiencies which have impeded the retention and or growth of value-added industries. The creation of Y2 will enable Missoula County to support value-added industries, which will in turn contribute to overall economic well-being of the county. The first step is establishing a TED is to conduct a review of infrastructure deficiencies and adopt a resolution of necessity for the area within which a TED can be designated. So the documentation of these conditions in accordance with state law provides the necessary foundation upon which we can establish a TED to invest public resources in infrastructure to support value-added economic development under statute. So the resolution does not finalize the boundaries of the TED. Boundaries of the TED can get smaller as we move forward, but they cannot get bigger. This action does establish the need for a TED, comprehensive development plan with a TIF provision, and the rationale for investing public funds in economic development activities. So in fulfillment of the requirement, the following infrastructure deficiencies have been identified: transportation infrastructure, water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, stormwater, and broadband. And for the very first time in one of our infrastructure deficiencies statements, we are also including workforce housing as infrastructure. And we believe that this meets the statute in House Bill 819, which was passed this past legislature, so that we can use TED funds to support workforce housing, to support value-added industries. So Janet Cornish and Brad Archibald are on the line to answer questions. The reason why we're doing a second TED and not just expanding the first one is because there were some changes in statute that made it, since 2020, the 95 mills from the state that are in TED districts have been cut in half in TED districts. And if we expanded the first district, we would have potentially lost that increment. So that's why we went with the second one. And so Janet and Brad are on the screen and here to answer questions.
I have a question for any of you guys could answer. This is about the legislative change. Does this mean in the new TED, all of those 95 mills are held back?
No, in the new TED, half
And
of
in
the
old-
95
and in
mills
the
are held.
first TED, the 95 mills stay the same?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That should be really meaningful to you, Superintendent.
That's up to the chair, but I will say that we're not prepared to talk about anything other than infrastructure deficiencies. And so if there's going to be discussion about TIF in general or politics around TIF, I'm not prepared to have that conversation today.
So Superintendent, I would suggest then, unless you want to talk about infrastructure, that you and Emily set a time and go have coffee and talk through it outside of this meeting. Unless you want to speak about infrastructure. Sure.
There it is. Thank you. So the infrastructure needs, I agree. That area out there does need to have addressed. It's not very well developed. Let's put it that way. But we actually have the Amazon facility has already been built. We have other facilities being built out there. And there's a but-for condition on this, which is that is the TIF or the TED actually going to stimulate that development? And that's the big question that we have, because the development is happening. And it seems from our perspective, wrapping that into a TED that is going to contain one half of our school district, that western side of that, is pulling funds away from our school to divert those to development that is already happening. And I think that's a major concern that we need to be aware of and cognizant of, is that this money isn't free. This is money, a lot of this money is coming from our school district, which means it's coming from our kids to build the infrastructure, which is already being developed.
So
Does that make sense?
it does, but I
yeah.
think what
Yeah.
I'd like to do, since that's a real concern, and
Yes.
I would encourage you
Yeah.
and Emily to talk outside of this,
Okay.
because today we'd be talking specifically about infrastructure deficiency, and we were talking about as a larger socio-political economic issue.
All right.
So this moment isn't the right moment to have that discussion, but I would encourage you guys to have that chat outside of this space.
And I think we have a meeting with you at the end.
We
of the
do.
month.
Yes, we
No,
do.
We will absolutely
All
be
right.
getting there.
Okay.
So
So,
thanks.
but I do want to address the concern about the but for. We are not able, industries currently are not able, they're not able to build out there the kinds of industries that we want to see because they don't have sufficient fire flow. Sometimes they have enough capital that they can buy enough water rights to build their own system. Most of the time they don't. Sometimes they're able to get together with one or two neighbors and build a tiny system that will provide fire protection for that area. But the vast, vast, vast majority of businesses that want to relocate or to grow in Missoula, that want to be at the Y, do not have adequate fire protection, and they cannot get it without a water system. Furthermore, workforce housing is defined as 10 houses per acre. You cannot build 10 houses per acre without a public water system. That is absolutely a fact. And so in order to build enough workforce housing to serve these industries that we want to see, we have to have a public water system. We also have to have a public sewer system. Additionally, the soils out there are very, well, the drain, there's a real problem with drainage. And you can see it, and actually that's why we're building there, is because it's not prime ag land. That's why our community said we want to see growth at the Y, because when we had one of the reasons we're creating this TED now and we didn't create it this size before is because we've adopted zoning that Bailey talked about a few minutes ago since the first Y TED was created. The community said during that process they want to see growth at the Y, and our agricultural community and our development community agreed this was the place it was going to happen because it's not prime ag land. And so we have a serious issue with drainage out there. So yes, absolutely, absolutely, it is a but for.
Thanks. You guys have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you,
Thank
Emily, for explaining that.
Yeah, thank you.
I move that we adopt a resolution declaring an infrastructure deficit area, that it exists within Missoula County in an area known as the Y2, and that the investment in infrastructure in that area is necessary in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Missoula County.
Second.
All right, any more public comment? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Now on to the marquee event. Oh, please, 3 minutes.
Just
A little break, absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna do a 3-minute break, then we'll come back for budget. Yeah. It is tightly linked to property taxes. So I'm going to rant for a few minutes about property taxes before our very own Chief Administrative Officer, Chris Lounsbury, and our Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Choiney, talk a little bit. So when thinking about property taxes, there's a piece of this that belongs to the state and a piece that belongs to the county. And I just wanted to lay these things out. Everybody out there who owns a house got a letter from the Department of Revenue in the not too distant past that says what your house was appraised at. That's a valuation. Your home is valued as residential property. In fact, all real estate in the county gets valued by the state, but not all as residential property. In fact, there are 16 different property tax classifications. Residential property is but one, but residential property is super important because it's where everybody lives. So if you kind of imagine that letter you got, the first big box there was the appraised value of your house, how much your house is worth. That piece is up to the state. but it's not up to the whims of the state. The state did their very best job. And when I say the state, I mean the Department of Revenue. They do their very best job at ascertaining market value. They believe that's the market value of your house on the day that they appraised your house. There are 15 other property tax classifications. The residential property tax classification is very different than the others. It's really different than the others because the market does not play a big role in determining the value of those other property tax classifications. It should, but it doesn't. So we all saw the value of our homes soar 35, 50, 60% in some cases. Most of those other property tax classifications, the real estate that was in there did not go up, or it went down. Now, I'm only bringing this up because what that means is that if all the property taxes get paid, when all those property taxes get paid, the great burden, the lion's share comes from people who live in houses, whether homeowners or renters. This is such a big deal that in November of last year, the Department of Revenue went to the state legislature, and presented them with a different tax rate. They said, state legislature, right now the tax rate, that's how much your property is taxed, is 1.35% for residents, for residential property taxes, residential property tax category. If we wish property taxes to remain flat, that rate should be adjusted to 0.94. And those other property tax classifications could come up. And then the burden of property taxes would be spread across all these different property tax classifications. And historically, when this has happened, and it's not that unusual, the state legislature has responded and changed, literally turned down the dial on the residential tax rate. This year, they took a pass. They said 1.35%, I guess that's going to be fine. That caused a massive increase in the potential for property taxes. Two big pieces there, what I want you all to remember, and this gets really complicated. The valuation, how much the property is worth, and what the tax rate is. The valuation, it's supposed to be a function of the market. It really is only a function of the market in residential property taxes. Most of those other tax categories, it's not, though it should be. The tax rate, definitely a function of policy. And this year, the state decided 1.35% was plenty. They didn't reduce it, even though the Department of Revenue said if you'd reduce that to 0.94, it would keep property taxes flat. Okay, there's the state piece. On over to the county piece. Budget, which is why we're here today. We don't look at that letter the Department of Revenue and sent out and said, okay, this is the maximum amount we can tax. We'll just tax that amount and we'll figure out how to spend the money. That's completely wrong. We start with a budget. And we've spent months and months, and really smart people like these folks have poured their hearts and souls and brains into this to come up with a budget that provides good services to the folks in Missoula County and does not bankrupt anybody, to the best we can, that limits our growth, that really keeps how much our taxation is down to as little as possible and still delivering services. That little as possible is really important, not because it's morally and economically important. It's important because the state has capped how much we can tax. There's this thing called a mill cap. We can't go beyond this cap. The cap basically is what we did last year plus half the 3-year average of inflation. There's a hard and fast cap. I'm bringing all this up because a piece of our property taxes, if you go to Property Tax Information System, look at a pie chart. You can type your address and your name in and look at a pie chart and see of all the taxes you pay, what goes to the city, what goes to the county, what goes to the special districts, fire districts, et cetera, and what goes to the state. It's interesting I'm bringing the state up because people generally would think the state runs on income taxes, not on property taxes. They have 95 mills. That's 95 units of taxation. It's the same 95 mills every year. Our mills are capped. The states are not capped. This is a big deal in that the money that goes to the state via property taxes will increase to a very large degree this year. So this may seem like this one crazy Democrat is just ranting here in Missoula. I see you smiling, Peter. The mayor of Wokestan has lost his mind yet again, right? I want to read a teeny little piece of a letter, a small little piece of a letter. This is from the Montana Association of Counties, and this letter was written to our governor. So this is not the mayor of Wokestan. This is the Montana Association of Counties. Yeah, good with Eric. Okay, so here's this little section. The legislature controls the rate at which residential property is taxed. And when increases in appraised values for residential property are forecasted, as they were before the 2023 session, mitigation was an option. That means turning down the dial on the tax rate. The rapid increase in residential property in Montana will result in a tax reduction for all other classes of property for county mills because we are all mill levy limited. That's the mill cap. Montana counties will levy less mills next year on all classes of property as a result of the reappraisal. Residential property valuation increases will outpace all other classes of property. And the net result will be a reduction in all other classes of property because residential properties will shoulder a larger percentage of the total taxable value in any taxing jurisdiction. This is how our tax system works in Montana, and telling local governments to show greater fiscal restraint does not stop the burden from shifting to residential property taxpayers. We all are enduring a massive burden shift. That's what we are feeling right now. Our response to that is our budget. But that only helps a little bit. If we want to see real change, we're going to need our legislature to ask those other property tax classifications to pay their share and lighten the load on homeowners and renters. End of rant. Please come to the mic. And you got to say your name if you don't mind. Yes, I believe so.
Oh, okay. I would just like to comment on your perspective on the
Sure.
legislature's action. It seems to me, I'm a property owner. I'm not a business owner. I have no interest in any non-commercial real estate, and I'm one of the ones that's going to be affected by any change in property tax. But I will tell you that what this state needs are decent paying jobs so that people can compete for homes. And what they're doing is they're lessening the burden on job creators. Now, maybe you don't think that's fair or important, but I'm telling you, at least in my humble opinion, it is.
Thanks for your opinion. Appreciate it. Mike, I wish the state would have said that. That's a valid economic viewpoint. So I appreciate it. Budget presentation.
So thanks, commissioners. My name is Chris Lonsbury. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer.
Your mic on?
It is, but apparently maybe we'll do this side and see if it picks up better as opposed to that. So thanks for that. My name is Chris Lonsbury. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for Missoula County, and I will walk you through the property tax portion of our budget, and then our Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Chorney, will walk you through how those numbers play out. So I want to start here first with our budget process. And so as we've mentioned a few times, really for the county, we start with the budget process. We don't start with the mill value. We don't start with the taxing piece. We start with how do we continue to provide the high level and quality of service that Missoula County residents expect when they are here in Missoula County and that our visitors expect when they come to our community. And so that process plays out by department heads getting together and going through what it will cost just to continue to provide the existing level of service that we currently provide to the community. And that's where we start. And then we look at what are the needs beyond that we are hearing from our constituents, that we are seeing increased related to increased requests for service, as well as looking at the values of Missoula County. And just as one example of how we see those increases, if we look at the fact that the county provides 911 service for the entirety of the county, so that when you call 911, somebody answers the phone each time, every time, and then those first responders are able to get to you. Over the last 5 years, we've seen an increase of more than 1,000 calls per year to the 911 center. And so that is a real increase and a real impact that we feel and that residents feel. It means longer wait times for someone to answer. It means longer hold times when we have multiple calls coming in. So those are some of the real budget concerns that we sit down and we look at. The next thing that we look at are what are some of the forces that are at play in our community. And certainly right now, we are seeing significant challenges around staffing at Missoula County. And I will get into that more when we look at our workforce section of the presentation. But Beyond that, we are also seeing an increased need for services that are coming from our constituents and from the community. And I mentioned the 911 Center is one example of that, but when we really look, it's not just the 911 Center. We're seeing that across all of our public safety sectors, as well as public service around things like roads and bridges and other needs in the community. So department heads put together those requests for new services and then get back together, and we go through a process where we determine how we'll evaluate those against all of the competing needs across 30 departments for Missoula County. And as a reminder for folks, Missoula County is an arm of the state. All of the functions that Missoula County conducts are requirements under the Montana Code Annotated. And this year, we really forced departments to work very hard to make sure that while they are subject to the full inflationary force of the economy, which means when we go out and buy tires, gasoline, oil for cars, all of those things, paving materials, we pay the full market inflated rate that they are selling for right now. We ask departments to stay at 3% of operational costs, which is less than our current inflationary rate here in Missoula County. So then we go through as a group along with the county commissioners, and we look at how each of those budget pieces fit into the values of Missoula County, which include things like a healthy, safe, and vibrant community, public engagement, quality workforce, research, stewardship, and economic development. So I'm going to start off with the things that we have that the commissioners are considering approving that are one-time funding requests. One-time funding requests largely mean that that event is or item that we're going to purchase occurs one time and one time only. It comes from a variety of things, and that includes prudent fiscal management, things like saving for the fact that we'll have to replace cruisers, that we'll have to replace pieces of public works equipment, that we have buildings that we're responsible for maintaining, parks and other pieces of property, as well as looking at one-time or short-term staffing requests. Those staffing requests generally fall into the longer-term category of ongoing spending, but we do have some that are in the one-time category this year. And again, we looked at trying to keep operational requests at approximately 3%. So I'm going to go through each of the one-time requests and where those are coming from, just so folks have it. And again, this is coming from savings, so this will not change the amount of property taxes that Missoula County is planning on levying next year or collecting next year. This came from prudent fiscal management of saving for these known capital costs that we will have. So the first is for our 911 Center. We're looking at using $90,000 in savings from what's known as the 911 Quarter Fund. So everybody in the state of Montana pays $1 per month on their cell phone bill. The county gets back a portion of that based on population, and we have been saving that money. The 911 Center is located in this building, in the administrative building, but we also have a backup facility that is currently located at the airport and no longer meets the requirements necessary for a community of 120,000 people. So this $90,000 will allow us to move and upgrade the equipment at the backup center to a facility that will continue to meet the community's needs when the 911 Center is not able to occupy this building. The next is for the detention center. Again, our detention center was built more than 20 years ago, and so as one would expect, we've been saving to help replace some of the items in the detention facility that might need replacement. And the first one of those is a variable air volume system. And so we are responsible for the care of those people who are in our custody, and what this system does is allow us to control the air mix inside the facility to make sure that we have fresh air and ventilation inside the detention facility, not only for those who are in our custody and care, but our employees who work in that facility. The courthouse elevator needs to be updated to meet current fire code and also to be able to carry the capacity of folks who use the courthouse building. And so there was a request for $300,000, again, of savings money that we have put aside specifically for replacement and refurbishment of the equipment that is in our buildings. And so that is a $300,000 request to completely rebuild the elevator that serves this building, in particular this side of the elevator that serves the courts that are located in this building. All of our buildings require an electronic access to them so that we can track employees moving in and out of the buildings, but also to make sure that our grounds folks can get into them to take care of them over the weekends and during the night. There's a request to use $110,000 again of planned savings to update that system. The system that we currently use is called the DIAX system. It was actually built for the Denver airport, and this will allow us to update to a more modern system that will allow us to address some of the security concerns in our building. The next one is a housing inventory study. As you know, we've been working very hard with our partners in the Grants and Communities program to look at the way that we can assist the housing crisis that's occurring in Missoula County and help to provide that. This will create a housing inventory outside of the city limits, again, from savings to help us target how we invest funds through the American Rescue Plan, the Build Back Better Plan, and the infrastructure plan to make sure that we can support workforce housing in our communities outside the city limits. So looking in the areas of public engagement, again, going back to those core values that Missoula County has, we work very closely with our partners at the city and also at the state and on the federal level. The first request is for a piece of software for a cost of $2,500 to allow us to more easily track the bills that we track and provide that information in a clean and transparent way to the public. This allows us to have a publicly accessible site that will make sure that folks know when Missoula County is taking positions on legislative bills. We invest pretty heavily in our workforce, and we have a request again from Savings this year to allow someone to attend some advanced training in leadership for a cost of approximately $5,000 from Savings. Next, we are very fortunate in Missoula County to have many great amenities that encourage folks to live in Missoula. One new museum that is being built in Missoula County, particularly around the history of the fire service in Missoula County and across the nation, is looking at building a new building out past the airport. And they have requested that we assist by an in-kind waiver of fees for the construction of that building. That approximate cost is $10,000. The next one is a contribution that we are actually receiving. The city of Missoula, as part of their budget, is releasing some funding from their tax increment districts. We are requesting that the commission consider using $500,000 of that savings from the remittance of the TIF district to help with the remodel that has happened at the election center. Missoula County is responsible for conducting all of the elections, both city, state, and federal elections, and those facilities are heavily used, and this is a renovation of that space to make sure that it can adequately meet the needs of the public. And then the next is the rural community conversation series. So the commissioners, in conjunction with our community and planning services staff, as well as our communications folks, are using some one-time funding here again from the revenue fees that we receive from the cable franchise with Charter Spectrum to host community events and opportunities for communities to do strategic planning around the things that are important in those communities. And again, that is non-tax supported. It comes from a fee that is charged on cable television bills outside the city limits. So on the quality workforce side, on our one-time expenditures, we have some temporary staff positions that we have funded both during the pandemic and also to request this year for staff that are transitioning out to allow some backfill of that. So the first of those is continued support in the amount of approximately $11,000 for the folks who are working towards the local JEDI advisory board. The next one on that, we have had significant pressures on our law enforcement partners, but that in turn creates additional pressure on the folks who provide victim support services and our county attorney's office in order to be able to prosecute those crimes. And there is a request to use funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA, in the amount of $280,000 for crime victims advocate support and approximately $230,000 in county attorneys support to allow them to continue to fund some additional positions that have been necessary to address some of the increased caseload that occurred with the backlog in the courts during COVID. And the last, we have a long-term HR employee who is retiring later this year. There's a request to be able to backfill that position before that employee leaves so that there can be some training. They come to us with a very specific skill set around ADA and HRB issues, Human Rights Bureau issues. And so there's a request to be able to hire someone before that employee leaves to be able to do some knowledge transfer. In the area of resource stewardship, the county will spend approximately $1 million this year should the commission move forward with the purchase of Marshall Mountain. Those are from existing open space bonds that have already been issued, so there is no increased tax burden, but we will expend $1 million of open space funds towards that purchase if the commission moves forward with it. We have some repairs to the stormwater system. You heard about some of the infrastructure deficiencies out at the Y. This is another area where there had previously been a TED. And so we have some challenges in the stormwater system there that need to be repaired, and that cost will come in at approximately $122,000. And again, these were planned savings that are being used for that project. The animal control building is inadequate. It is no longer able to house the number of animals that it was required to house in order to serve the community of Missoula, and we are planning on spending approximately $400,000, again from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, towards the renovation of that space. And you will see an ongoing request later also related to the animal control building. And then finally, the county's technology department is requesting to spend, again, some planned savings monies to update things like the firewall for Missoula County and some technology around the county to make sure that we can continue to provide both hybrid and in-person access for meetings in our various conference rooms, as well as secure the infrastructure that we have for folks. On the economic development front, Missoula County is going to increase, or is requesting to increase, its contribution to the Missoula Economic Partnership. We value our partnership with them. There's been significant work over the years. In particular, Missoula County hosts all of the grants for companies like ATG, now Cognizant, and others to help improve our workforce around that. There's a request to spend $20,000 again in planned savings this year towards that workforce development. There is a significant amount of recreational impacts that have occurred since COVID in Missoula County, and there is a request to work on a recreational impact study that would allow us to put a dollar value specifically on the amount of impact that tourism is having on our infrastructure and our community. And again, that is coming from savings for this year and does not have an ongoing property tax impact. The next request, the city of Missoula has requested that Missoula County continue its partnership around emergency winter shelter and consider expanding the use of that shelter to year-round. Missoula County is budgeting to spend approximately $900,000 on that. This will come from the remittance out of the tax increment finance districts in the city. So this is funds that were collected only from city residents. And so there's a request to use that, again, one-time funding to assist in this one-year opening of the Johnson Street shelter. Missoula County partners with United Way and the Hope Rescue Mission for the temporary safe outdoor space, which is located next to our detention facility. We help for the ongoing operations of that site, as well as providing for its construction. This year, there's a request to set aside up to $1 million in the American Rescue Plan Act funds that Missoula County has for that operation. The actual ongoing operational piece is right around $400,000 per year, but there are additional upgrades that will need to continue to that site to make sure that it is a safe environment for folks. There have been a great number of successes that have come out of there. The temporary safe outdoor space continues to have great success in housing people, and it really has been a very effective transitional program in Missoula County for folks experiencing homelessness. The last one here on economic development is the request for an incubation study. This is specifically around small manufacturing and what would be appropriate locations for that in Missoula County. And again, this is coming from savings. It's a one-time study request for $30,000. So now we'll switch over and we'll look at the things that will impact property taxes should they be adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. So these are the ongoing funding requests. It is a much shorter list than what we just went through, but again, broken out into categories that reflect Missoula County's values. I will say that we do continue to face extreme pressures around recruiting, and I will give some examples when we get to the quality workforce around some of the real challenges that we are experiencing here in Missoula County and recruitment and retention of staff. So for healthy, safe, and vibrant communities, as I mentioned, the detention facility is now more than 20 years old. One of the things that needs to be replaced there is the evaporative cooling tower, which helps with the temperature control inside the detention facility. The overall estimated cost for that is between $1.2 and $2 million. That is not how much we will be increasing taxes. That is the total cost for the replacement, but we will be requesting that the commissioners raise additional tax revenues to be able to cover the debt service for the replacement of that. The $2 million increase is beyond what we have set aside to be able to refurbish equipment inside the detention facility. On the public engagement front, we are looking at increasing the amount of funding that we allocate to the Parks and Trails grant program. This program is very successful in matching in-kind and grant donations to be able to install various equipment at our different parks. These are strong partnerships. When you think of Big Sky Park as one example of this out in the area off of 7th and Tower Road, it's an equestrian park, but also includes an archery range, walking trails, and we partner with several community groups in order to be able to maintain that park. And so there's a request to increase the amount that's available in the Parks Grant Program by $25,000 to continue to be able to match some of the funds that our partners are able to bring in for those community parks. Just as a reminder, Missoula County has over 90 parks in its park system. So I want to spend a little bit of time here on our workforce because this is probably our biggest challenge right now, like I think it is for most employers in Missoula County. We have had some unprecedented changes in the way that we look at recruitment and retention and our ability to retain folks in areas where we just don't historically see these kinds of pressures. And so, for example, in our sheriff's department, we were down at one point this year more than 8 deputy positions. That is almost unheard of in Missoula County. There are only 60 sworn law enforcement folks, so we're at almost 1/6 of the workforce. Was a reduction of 8 folks is almost 1/6 of the workforce. There are only 4 to 5 deputies on at any one given time, so 8 deputies across the system actually is pretty impactful to their ability to provide for public safety. In addition to that, our detention center is down 19 positions in Missoula County, which is a large number. There are only 11 to 12 folks on overseeing and taking care of more than 200 folks who are in our detention facility. Our 911 center was down 6 positions. They're still down 4 positions at this point as of today. Again, those are the folks who are on the front lines of answering every emergent call that comes into Missoula County. And then at one point, due to pressures from the state's ability to retain and recruit county attorneys away from our piece to go and work in their local office, we were down more than 4 county attorney positions at one point this year as well. And those are not the only departments that are experiencing those pressures. We have had to reduce hours for the clerk of district court due to staffing concerns. We've had high turnover in our justice court, in our clerk and recorder treasurer's office. It's seen across Missoula County departments. I just wanted to continue to provide a little bit of context for folks. When we look at having to recruit deputy sheriffs as one example of that, our market directly is the Missoula Police Department and the Missoula International Airport, both of which have law enforcement on staff, as well as the University of Montana. Currently, our probationary deputies start at more than 8% less than the city of Missoula is recruiting probationary police officers for. And as folks promote up the ranks, we obviously want our most experienced folks to be the ones who are supervising. Those percentages only get worse to almost a 20% difference when we get up to the rank of lieutenant. So the folks who have direct command and control for that, we are looking at more than a 20% differential when we go out to the market or we try to encourage people to promote up through the ranks. And so the fact that we were down 8 deputies meant this year we had to make some pretty significant changes to our rates of pay for law enforcement, detention, and some of those other things. But again, we tried to keep those costs as reasonable as we can. So 85% of all employees who work for Missoula County are in some form of collective bargaining. This year, a few of those are up there. We attempted to recognize the inflationary pressures that were happening and try to negotiate pretty hard given our other benefits that we're able to offer. And we were able to keep most of those increases to around 4%, which I think is pretty remarkable considering the last few years have had inflation between 8 and 6%. Our non-union personnel plan, so these are folks who are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement, will only see a 2.5% increase to, again, keep us inside the overall budget number that we'll get to at the end of the presentation. I do want to give a shout out when we talk about that. We have incredibly dedicated staff here at Missoula County. Over 80% of our staff, when they're surveyed, we survey them once a year, talk about how important being able to serve the public is to them and how much they value the fact that they work in public service. We have some pretty remarkable staff that does an amazing job every day. So moving on to resource stewardship. Again, the Parks and Trails Department, as I mentioned, has more than 90 parks that they are responsible for maintaining. They have not historically had a parks maintenance dedicated person. So there is a request this year to add a position that will be dedicated to parks maintenance. The cost of that will be approximately $73,000. In addition to that, we will need to, as I mentioned, to expand animal control to continue to meet state requirements for that facility and also to be able to house the number of animals that go through that facility. There's a request to increase funding to the Animal Control Department to cover the ongoing piece of debt servicing, that remodel of $10,000 this year. And finally, we have a request in the technology department to move some of our services from being maintained for staff. IT is one of those departments where we've had a significant challenge with recruitment. And so we are looking at moving some of those services out to hosted solutions. And there's a request to invest in that as well. Finally, before Andrew gets a chance to talk to you a little bit about how all of these numbers will impact folks' taxes and how that plays out across the state, we'll talk a little bit briefly about economic development. One of the things we've consistently heard from the development community is that our permitting software is cumbersome and difficult to use, and so there is a request to increase the support for that. It is not coming necessarily off of taxes, but will result in increases in permits and fees this year, or in subsequent years, to be able to offset the cost for changing that software at approximately $80,000. In addition, I'm not sure what mission is, but in addition, we have a request to enhance the amount of funding that's available for Public Works to be able to maintain some of their equipment and replace it. Public Works has been extremely innovative over the last several years. They've gone out to places like Salt Lake City, other places to purchase used equipment, but some of the equipment that they're using for road grading, for being able to create gravel, asphalt mix, and those things are 1960s and 1970s equipment, and we are at the point now where we have no choice but to replace some of that equipment because it is well beyond end of life and now is at the point of failure. And so there's a request to increase the funding to Public Works to be able to replace equipment. In addition to that, we have a request for ongoing support as if the commission again purchases Marshall Mountain, there will be an ongoing request for $105,000 that will be matched by the city of Missoula for approximately a total of $210,000 for the ongoing maintenance and staffing necessary for Marshall Mountain. Missoula County will continue to grow over the next few years. Part of that growth is, sorry, Josh, I know I'm putting people to sleep with my budget presentation. Sorry about that. We will continue to grow. We also will be taking on management of Larchmont Golf Course, which is an asset of Missoula County's that had previously been privately managed through a contract that will now come back under the county's stewardship. In order to be able to accomplish that and all of the additional recreational strains that we are seeing across our river system, we are requesting to enhance one of the positions in the Culture and Recreation Department, which includes our Parks, Trails, and Open Lands program, to allow for a department head level position to be able to work on those. The final thing on our economic development piece, as the commission is well aware, we received an incredibly generous donation from members of our community towards replacement of the grandstands, which includes all of the concrete work. In order to be able to remove the existing grandstands and do the site preparation work, as well as some of the other enhancements around that, we have a request for additional revenue to help support the ongoing debt service for those enhancements at the fairgrounds. I just want to highlight for folks that this does not include anything that was on the ballot language or the bond related to the ice rink or the 4-H program. This is simply around finishing out the existing projects that are on the fairgrounds, which includes the grandstands replacement. Really quickly for folks, we also, the Board of County Commissioners, are responsible for several special districts, which will need to increase this year. The first of those is the Sealy Lake Refuse District. So this is the trash district, if you want to think of it on different terms. Up in Sealy Lake, the cost there has not increased in the last several years, and there is an increase request this year for a fee increase of $20, which will move the cost for providing trash service in Sealy Lake up to $200 per year for folks, and also to increase the out-of-district fee by $4 per 32-gallon bag or $20 per cubic yard. Missoula County is also responsible for a number of streetlight, water, and sewer districts. This year, a few of those are going up. The vast majority are not. The districts that will see an increase this year are the Lolo Sewer and Water District will see an increase this year in order to be able to cover the costs for energy, staffing, and other items in that. The Sunset West Water District will also, that is located out by the Y. The Lewis and Clark Sewer District, which is located in the Clinton area, and the Elmar Water District, which is located out off of Mullen Road, will all see RSID increases this year in order to cover increased costs related to utilities and staffing for those services. All the other RSIDs and utilities that Missoula County is responsible for will maintain their current level of funding and their current request. I promise we're almost done, and I'll turn it over to Andrew. We do need to talk very briefly about the Missoula Local Government Building. So this is the former federal building. Missoula County, in partnership with the city of Missoula, has a lease with the U.S. Postal Service for part of that space and continues to look at what the highest best use for that space will be related to the location of government services. This year, we anticipate that through grants for remediation of things like lead paint and asbestos, that we will invest approximately $2 million in that. Approximately $1 million of that will come from Missoula County. We are covering that with one-time funds through grants and the American Rescue Plan Act. So there is no tax impact because of that, but it's important that folks know that we have that. And we will also spend some money in ongoing pieces related to the maintenance of that building that includes light, heat, and those things. And that will be about $119,000 this year after the offset from the the U.S. Postal Service lease. Okay, and with that, I will turn it over to Andrew. Although I thought I had a slide on the I'm sorry, there is one more slide. The American Rescue Plan Act. Again, just calling out here specifically, the American Rescue Plan Act is one-time funding. Federal funding does not come from local property taxes. We have investments that will go towards the Missoula Local Government Building that I just mentioned, our housing and homelessness support. That's the money that's set aside for the temporary safe outdoor space. Mental health services, the Crisis Receiving Center, so the mobile support team and Crisis Receiving Center has a set aside, as well as the funds that I mentioned related to the county attorney's office and our crime victims advocate positions. And with that, I will turn it over to Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'm a man of few words, so let's cut to the chase. What are all these wonderful programs in Bloomington County going to put? What's it going to cost us and push us forward?
Yep, same slide.
Oh, okay, great. Total countywide district increase, total countywide mill levy increase. That's the mill levies applied throughout the county, $2,811,135. The county only increase, $841,655. The open space increase, because those are most voted bonds, $24,564 decrease. So overall, $3,628,226 increase for a 5.4% increase in total taxes for all the programs combined. I'm hoping to reduce that by the final budget time. I don't know how much. It's going to be a little bit. So we're working very hard on that. How did we get here? Well, the assessed valuation, which is what the state calls the market valuation, is increasing substantially. It went up $6 billion last year to $24.8 billion. Go ahead to the next slide, Chris. And what that does is it gives us the ability to calculate our assessed valuations, and the assessed value, or the taxable valuations. Taxable valuations vary from 1.35 for residential to 1.89 for commercial. They apply the various valuations from the 14 different classes that Josh talked about. And within those 14 different classes, there are 1,200 different classes within those 14 classes. So it's very complicated, but the majority of it is shifting on to the residential homeowner. Total taxable value for the county in the fiscal year, increase of $84,000, about $84,000. Next slide, newly taxable piece of the equation. It's really important because the newly taxable property that comes onto the tax roll, that's how we spread out our taxes onto new entities and spread out the liability. This last year, we had a slight decrease in our taxable value. We're at $7,105,000. It contributes, people wonder about the newly taxable and how much it contributes, but for every mill that's levied within the county, it contributes $7,100 approximately, with a $7.1 million newly taxable increase. And talk about a little bit about the property tax shift to the residential class 4 homeowners. Montana uses an equalization formula when computing property taxes. All classes pay their fair share. However, the state modifies one class. When it modifies one class, it affects the other. It's like stepping on a balloon. The area of taxes go another way. It's shifted to another area. So this year, the legislature approved an exemption for up to $1 million of business property tax. Well, that tax didn't go away. It was shifted. It was shifted to another area, essentially residential homeowners. Well, commercial properties increased 23%, residential increased 37%. Currently in Missoula County, the centrally assessed properties had a decrease of 10%. Centrally assessed properties include airlines, electrical suppliers, pipelines, railroads, telecoms, and the railroads in statewide received a 23% decrease in their taxable value. I'm not sure why. They're bringing plenty of passengers up here, but the way they value their property, it's not on the value of the property, it's on the value whether they took a loss or a gain on their business for that part of the year. And the centrally assessed seem to have a loss each and every year. And they go to Helena and they get it decreased, and it shifts over to the residential homeowners. In the state's 95 mills, as we talked about, the fixed mills each and every year, they're not being adjusted for anything. They don't have the same restrictions that we do on 3%, half 3% inflation. So they're jerking a lot of money out here annually that's going to the state, and they're having the counties make up the difference. In the law, in the reappraisal cycle, in the 2-year reappraisal cycle, in the letters I've got highlighted in red, they say it's in the best interest of the state of Montana to mitigate fluctuations in market value in class 3 and class 4 properties that occur during a 6-year reappraisal cycle. That's why they were changing it from the 6-year to the 2-year. But in the last line, it also says to adjust the tax rates as needed to accomplish the intent. To mitigate fluctuations, they're going to adjust the tax rates. They adjusted the tax rates when it was on the 6-year reappraisal cycle, but when it came to the 2-year reappraisal cycle, there's never been one adjustment, although that residential home price value skyrocketed. It should have been adjusted downward. So in closing, property tax reform is needed. We need to adjust the tax to adjust for the fluctuations in the market intended. We need to stop shifting the tax burden to residential housing, shed some daylight on centrally assessed property reductions, and develop methodology which has tourists pay for infrastructure they use, which county taxpayers currently shoulder the burden for. That's all I have.
Thanks, Andrew. So I want to go back to just highlight a couple of things because I think this is ultimately what most folks are here for. So this year, our proposed budget increases by 5.43% overall, which is an increase in tax revenue of 5.42% or $3.6 million. Keep in mind that currently the consumer price index shows that we are experiencing roughly still a 6% inflationary factor here in Missoula County. So we've tried hard to stay under that. And we will continue to work to refine that number down between the preliminary and final budget. And so how this plays out for folks, so if you live in the city limits, you will see an approximate annual increase of $67 for every $100,000 in assessed value, or $5.58 a month. And in the county, you will see an increase or an additional $82 for every $100,000 in assessed property value, or $6.83 per month. And the reason that it is higher in the county is because there are several mills that are county only, and that includes animal control, the health department, and public works, where we provide the service only outside the city limits. Important for folks to know that this is only the preliminary budget hearing, and so public comment is taken not only today, but you can provide public comment through the Missoula County Voice, which is missoulacountyvoice.com, which also has the budget documents available for folks. You can also email the commissioners at bcc@missoulacounty.us. You can call and leave a voicemail at 406-258-4877, or mail your comments to the Commissioner's office at 200 West Broadway, Missoula, Montana 59802. And with that, Commissioners, I'd ask you to open the public hearing and begin taking public comment.
Just before we do that, could you go back to the slide? We have the increase in revenue. It was 5.4%.
Right there.
There we go. Thanks. Just, I feel like Peter and Brett, this is one you most likely would be interested in, and just want to make sure you get all three of these numbers.
Yeah, you bet. So again, for Missoula County, we are looking at a 5.43 overall budget increase from 2023, and that includes all voted and permissive levies. So that's the total. That results in 5.42% increase in tax revenue, which is $3.6 million. Or 5.9%, sorry, and the consumer price index is 5.9%, or roughly 6% in Missoula right now for the last 12 months. So we have tried to stay under that number.
Thanks. Anyone like to speak? Any public comment? You're more than welcome to. Please. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Mike Paterni. I think the most shocking thing I've heard today was the shortfall in funding in staffing for law enforcement.
Mike, can you start over again and,
Yes,
and
we
get
can,
really
Mike.
close to the
Oh, okay.
microphone?
I think one of the most shocking things I heard was the tremendous shortfall in funding for not in funding, but in staffing for law enforcement and some of the other basic services that, at least in my opinion, are within the scope of local government. I also heard that you were planning on spending a lot of money on things that, in my humble opinion, are not in the scope of local government. And running businesses or acquiring more land and taking out of the tax base, I'm not overly concerned about the value coming out of the tax base, but setting ourselves up for more expenses in the future is unconscionable given these shortcomings. In this economy, which is likely to persist for a while, and with the cost of housing in this county, we're not going to get people if we don't raise their salaries. And the same is true for local business. If they're not going to pay people more, they're not going to have employees. And it's just the way it is. You may have seen in the local news that people are now expecting almost $80,000 a year for a job they might take, I'm assuming out of college, I don't know. But that's just an indication of what we're facing. So in my view, it's very important that you focus on things that are within the scope, the reasonable scope of local government. And the other thing that I can't help but notice is that the county budget has increased substantially over the last 5 years. Now, we've had significant inflation over the last 2 or 3, but 10% a year is a lot. And a lot of things you want to fund are from savings. So if you're having so many savings, it indicates to me that you've not tightened your belt very well. And I would appreciate any feedback on that. And I assure you, you'll see this in writing at some point. I'm also disappointed that a copy of the preliminary budget is not available before this meeting, because the sooner people can give you feedback, the easier it'll be for you to work with it. And waiting to get a copy of the preliminary budget, sometime between now and your final budget hearing, to me is unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. So thank you. Oh, wait, I have a few more.
Can I respond to a couple? Maybe we can go back and forth a little bit.
I'm sorry?
if I can answer a couple of these and we can go back and forth a little bit.
Sure.
So you mentioned the wages, and I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding there. Chris showed on that wage sheet how far behind our law enforcement officers are. So we raised their wages. You saw that deficit?
I can't read that.
I'm sorry about that.
I couldn't really hear everything. I'm sorry.
Okay, so what Chris showed is that our sheriff's deputies are behind in wages. They're making less.
Oh, and your point is you're increasing them in your preliminary.
Correct.
Great.
So
I'd love to see it on paper and in
That's what
contrast.
we did. What you're saying we ought to do, we just did.
Great, wonderful. Kudos. But I'd like to see it in juxtaposition to other things that you're increasing or planning to spend money on at the expense of people with limited incomes, fixed incomes, retirees who really can't afford a huge increase in their property taxes. And people in the city, I feel sorry for them. I don't live in the city, but they're getting whacked. So it's in your hands. I really question the county taking over management of Larchmont. I simply do not understand how you think you can do a better job managing that than professionals who may be contracting for it. And I'm curious about how you view the scope of your responsibilities as county commissioners, as local government. What should be in and what should be out? And I know there's a lot of gray areas, and public welfare is tough to describe. I heartily support efforts to help homeless people, but we're not going to solve that problem in Missoula County. So I urge you to work on the governor and others to step up and do some things. And I might remind you that the Warm Springs facility that helped with mental health issues is hurting like crazy for money. And that could be part of the reason the state's hanging on to some, right? There's a lot of things at play here, but I think that in this environment, we really need to hold off on additional spending. And I might note that in Bozeman, they have decided, the local government there, they've decided, I saw on the news, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but not to entertain proposals for increased bond issuance, because they realize that costs have gone up in a way that people have limited opportunity to absorb. And I think, using the state government as an excuse, what they've done, I mean, the buck stops with you people. And as I say, it's not like you've been at a static budget for the last 5 years. It's gone up a lot. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so why don't we do the folks online for you? You
Hello?
want to call them out? Oh, shoot, Peter, we should talk after.
The person with a phone number ending in 1829, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. I have a number of things to discuss, but that last gentleman brought up some stuff about wages, and since you've done the same thing with the sheriff's deputies.
Can you state
Quite
your name for the
frankly,
record, please? Sorry to interrupt.
my name is Keith. My name is Keith Koprovica. Let's not forget that in this past year, the Missoula County Sheriff's deputies had to sue the county, and there was a $3.5 million settlement because the elected officials took massive pay raises, and sheriff's deputies' wages are tied to the elected sheriff. And Missoula County ended up settling a lawsuit, which was back wages and attorney's fees and penalties for $3.5 million. The detention officers are also still currently in a lawsuit because their contract wage is also tied to the elected sheriff, and that's all because of pay raises that the elected officials, including the commissioners, took. I'd like to talk a little bit about the tax system. I appreciate the fact that maybe we do have some issues with our state tax system, but if the changes are made to where there's more taxes given to other classifications besides residential, that money still has to be recovered some way. So if it goes to commercial properties, then the commercial properties are only going to pass that tax burden back on to customers, and it all comes down to a spending issue. Just a couple of points I want to bring up. According to information provided that I requested from the county's information portal, in the 5 years beginning in calendar year 2019, Missoula County has collected over $6.1 million in new property tax revenue from new residential and commercial development. So where has all of that money gone? I requested information on how much Missoula County has collected in recreational marijuana taxes, and where's that money going? I haven't gotten that answer yet. According to Smart Asset, the median annual property tax payment in Missoula County is $3,760, and they rate Missoula County as the highest taxed county in the state of Montana, even higher than Gallatin County. So what I'm asking you to do is cut some expenses. Now, one thing I would love to see is all of the expenses from all of the departments. I made a request earlier this year asking what it would take to get all of the expenses from the 12 biggest departments within the county, and I was told it would cost me about $100 to obtain that information. I'd like to see, as a taxpayer, and I'm sure most of us as taxpayers would like to see where all of the expenditures are going, not just an outline with the preliminary budget, but I'd like to see a line item of every expenditure from every department, and let's see where the money is going. I'd also like to comment on the Marshall Mountain situation. Now, Marshall Mountain, although it looks like the purchase is going to come from open space bonds, there's still going to be maintenance in Marshall Mountain, and it's only going to serve a fraction of the population. We have miles and miles and miles of mountain bike and hiking trails already open to the public in Missoula. If Marshall Mountain is to be a place for mountain biking and hiking, it should be purchased by user groups and operated by user groups. We can't afford to continue to fund all of these projects and then maintenance on top of it. So I think we need to start over on the expenditures. We can't afford tax increases. Thank you.
Other online folks.
C. Flood, go ahead.
Hey, this is Cameo Flood. I am a resident of Missoula County. And I just wanted to mention that I appreciate the concern about the state's management of the property taxes, but there are some things that the county could do. And one of those is that the city currently owns close to $400 million worth of property within the county that is not taxed. So before the city takes on any more property, I'd like it if the county would let people know how much loss in tax revenue there's going to be. And I'd like to see the city get rid of that property, or at least some of it. And in addition, the county owns $87 million worth. So I looked at what Gallatin County, which is kind of a similar sized area, and added up all of the cities in Gallatin County, and they own about a quarter as much as Missoula County and the city of Missoula owns. I think there's a disparity there. And then if you also would look at, and this is just a request I have, look at who has tax exempt property in the county and whether those people are groups. I mean, some of these groups are businesses that complain about the cost of housing and the access to affordable housing, and whether they really deserve to have a property tax exemption, and whether, if they do deserve some, whether it's all of it that they get, and whether they're accumulating property without having to pay taxes on it, but it's not benefiting the citizens, which would be the implication of their tax exempt status. And I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my concern. Thank you.
Thanks. One thing I just want to point out, we don't get to decide who gets a property tax exemption and who doesn't. That's state law. And Mikey said, oh, the buck stops with us. Our budget starts and stops with us, but the state writes the laws on tax policy. We abide by those laws. And we have kept our revenue under the rate of inflation. I would challenge you and your business. Have you been able to stay underneath the rate of inflation? Well, then you're killing it. Okay, next. Please, sir.
Okay. My name's Gary Wanberg and I live here in Missoula County. And I would just like to say that I concur 100% with Keith Koprovica and Cameo Flood. And I didn't hear anything in your presentation about things that you were going to discontinue or things that you were going to cut. And I would just like to refer you to a slogan that was used with regarding drugs years ago, which is just say no.
Please.
Sir, would you mind coming back up? I would just love to know if you have any specifics of areas of our budget programs that you would like to see trimmed back, cut, modified.
I don't have any specifics, no. I haven't looked at it that closely and that in depth, but I with a county this size, I am sure there are items that could be cut.
And maybe Chris or Andrew, for the next presentation, I mean, we can kind of address how many of the requests we said no to. And that might be helpful for folks.
Unless you have that at your fingertips now. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I would be glad to think about that and go over some of the expenditures and come up with a list.
Okay, thank you.
I don't, Commissioner Vera, but we can put that together for a final budget. You bet. And we can put it out on the website beforehand.
Great,
Yep.
thanks.
Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead. The person with 1829 phone number, go ahead.
Yes, it's Keith Koprovica again. You'd mentioned that Commissioner Strohmeyer, that you'd like maybe some examples of areas to cut. I guess that's what I was asking for before, is let us see the full budgets of all the departments, and then maybe we can make some suggestions on areas to cut. I will tell you, and I've only seen one of these, but I did see a budget from a county department from several years ago, and there was thousands of dollars spent on personal property. There was hundreds, if not thousands of dollars spent on bagels and coffee and cake and cookies. And that's the kind of expenditures I think we need as taxpayers to see, so we can make the suggestions on where things can be cut. Thank you.
Anybody else? Chris, can you remind us how long we'll keep this hearing open for?
Yeah, so your final budget adoption will be the week of September 7th. And Cheryl can probably correct me, but I believe September 7th is the Thursday public meeting that will be your final budget presentation and potential budget adoption. Again, you can provide public comment, and there are documents up and available on the Missoula County Voice page, which is missoulacountyvoice.us, as well as you can email bcc@missoulacounty.us for comments or call the commissioner's office as well.
Great. Thank you.
Chris, when and where will today's presentation be available for folks to view?
Yes, so at the conclusion of today's presentation will be available up on the Missoula County Voice page as well.
Okay.
So on our website.
How about for folks who don't have web access?
We can certainly, if somebody needs it, print out a copy of it and provide it. Yes.
Thank you.
Just a slight correction. It is on the Missoula County Voice page right now.
Well, thank you. It is apparently this presentation is already up. Somebody's Emmy or Carrie back on the other side has apparently already got it uploaded.
Okay, thanks.
Wait, what phone number for folks to call if they don't have web access?
You bet. So sorry, that would be the commissioner's office, and the phone number in the commissioner's office is area code 406-258, and then the extension is 4877.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, then unless there's anybody else would like to say anything, I believe we're done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.